Welcome along everyone. Today I'm going to be demonstrating this card. Well, as you can see, it's not a card. I'm afraid the original is with Wendy, but you can see the image and I've posted the card on the Cardio Facebook group. So if you want to take a closer look, have a look on there. I'm going to be using these stamp sets. So the branch from the Peaceful Panorama collection, Evergreen Encounter and Whitewoods. Okay, so I'm going to get started straight away with this because it's there's quite a lot of detail in this card. So as you can see, I've taped off my card because I want this landscaped. I'm going to start by taking one of the trees, tall trees from the Whitewoods collection, and I'm going to stamp it in versafine smoky grey to start with. So I'm going to stamp it all over with that, and then I'm going to add onto it some versacraft real black. I'm only doing this with the front two trees because I want them to be quite prominent. You know, it's the nearer things are to you, the darker they look. So we're going to place that around there on the card and press down. And then I'm going to take another of the trees from the tall trees collection, another of the tall trees, and do exactly the same thing. Stamp all over in the smoky grey, and then just go over it with the versacraft real black. And then that one's going to go around here because I want to leave space for the sitting stag. So I'm going to put this one about here. So press that down like that. So now I'm going to stamp the two stags, and I'm going to use the versafine grey, smoky grey for this. Now on the TV show it's commented on about there not being harsh lines on the deer, and I find that because I want this to look almost, I suppose, like a pencil drawing, when you use this versafine smoky grey you don't get those harsh lines. I'm going to mask off my tree because I want it to look as if the deer is behind the tree. So I'm going to mask off there, and then I'm going to stamp the deer so his feet are almost on the masking tape. Now it doesn't matter because we're going to cover the bottom up, so don't worry if you miss his feet or if they don't stamp, don't worry too much about it. And like I said to you in previous videos, just give your stamp a little time on the card for the ink to absorb. There, so we've got our stag, and then I'm going to take the sitting stag and do exactly the same. I'm going to stamp it all over in the versafine grey, give it a good inking, and then this stag is going to be slightly higher because I'm going to put this stag on a little mound. So we're going to stamp that right there, like that. Now you can see the two different colours. Don't worry about this because we're going to go in with a paintbrush and we're going to touch up either where we want it darker or where we want it lighter. So don't worry about that. Now we want to stamp in some of the background trees. Before I do that, I'm going to put in the little mound where we want our sitting deer. So I've cut out a mask, as you can see, out of copy of paper. I'm just going to put it slightly, see where the legs bent there. I'm going to put it just behind that, and then it's going to come down. I want it to come down here. So we do our normal dry baby white technique, and I'm using the versafine smoky grey for this too. Now, as I've shown you before, if you're doing this, just rub a little bit off first, and then we gently create that line. Now, don't worry, again, if you're going down, if it hits the hoof or anything, because this is all going to be covered up. And again, the tree, it doesn't really matter either because we're going to put colour onto the tree. So we just really want to create a line as a visual so we know where to put our other trees. So we lift that up, you can see there we've created a line, and then I'm going to do the same along the back because we want the same idea along the back. So for this, I'm going to just put that there, and I want it to sort of meet the heel. So I'm just going to do exactly the same thing again. Just gently. It doesn't matter if you put it over the deer. It doesn't really matter. It's really for our guide when we do the trees. So you see, I've got a line there and a line there. And then what we're going to do is stamp all the background in. Now, I want to cover up the deers when I do this, because obviously I don't want a tree coming down over the deer's face or anything. So we're going to put a mask here. Now, you can tell by this that my fussy cutting isn't the best, all right? But it doesn't really matter. As long as you've got the main body of the deers covered up, don't worry too much about spending ages cutting out the fiddly little bits. So we're going to put that one there. And then we're also going to put back in place, you can see how smudged, don't worry about that. I'm going to put this mask back here. I'm just going to wipe my hands because I don't want to get any more smudges on the card. And then what we do now is we just create the background with the different trees. So don't always use the same tree for this. There are 3 trees in this collection. So alternate them, because then, you know, they're all slightly different. And all these trees I'm going to do in the smoky grey. And I'm going to first and secondary stamp them. So I'm going to start here, press down hard, and then I'm going to put one in the background there. And then I'm going to put another tree onto the block. And because it's going to be slightly nearer here behind the deer, I'm going to actually stamp in smoky grey and then a little bit of the versacraft real black, sorry. So you make up your mind. If you think the trees are going to be nearer, then do them slightly darker. So we're going to put that one there. We're going to press quite hard. See, it's slightly darker. And then we're going to put another one behind it and there. Now you repeat this process, obviously because you want to fill up the forest with trees in the background. And when you get to this bit, so we've got the mask in place here, just make sure it's in position. So I can go to there without worrying about removing the mask. I think if you can see, there are these trees have got the white coming through, so I'm going to use a darker one now just to make sure they all look a little bit different. And again, I think we'll put that one there. And then as we go over to the other side, we're going to put the other mask back because you know, we don't want to, so we turn the mask over, we just put it there, and then we do exactly the same thing on the other side. So there's one, this side I want to look as if it's really close. So we're going to stamp that in the the versafine smoky grey with the versacraft real black over the top. So I'm going to put that, I'm going to take away this mask because I want it to come right down here. So that's going to go there. And then I'm going to secondary stamp, put the mask back, secondary stamp that so it looks like it's behind, like that. So now you can see one's in the foreground, one's in the background, and then we just continue that process. I think we don't need any more in the foreground, so I think all the rest will now be in smoky grey, but we will need to cover that up there, so. And then secondary stamp. Now if your stamp doesn't quite hit like that, it really doesn't matter with this, because I say we can go in afterwards, we can touch up with a paintbrush, or you can do it with pencils, colouring pencils, or just ordinary HB pencils. You don't have to have a lot of equipment to do this card, but it just takes a little bit of time. The stamping takes a little bit of time. So you need, really, it's more patience. So we're going to put some in the middle here, and we're going to put another one there. And then I think we'll just go, I can just see a couple of gaps, so I'm just going to take one of the different stamps and just fill in where I can see there's a few gaps, like there. Okay. Now, if you look at this, I think there is a little bit of gap between here and here, but I think it'd be quite nice if we just masked halfway up. Now, these are the sort of decisions you can make on the spur of the moment, because you're looking at your composition, you're thinking, well, do I like that or don't I? So I'm going to just put this mask here, so this next tree looks like it's going to be coming from there. And I think what we'll do is we'll put the smoky grey on, and then we'll put a tiny little bit of the versacraft black on it, just to make it slightly darker than the trees. And then we'll try and put it in the middle so we can see it. There, can you see? So that is now sort of rooted there. Okay, so I think we've probably got enough trees there. Now what we're going to do is add some branches in. Now there's lots of branches in with this collection, and these, again, I would stamp in the versafine grey. So don't use the same branch all the time. There's lots of different ones. So just take them and then randomly place them throughout the forest like that. I'm going to keep changing. You can't see this probably because the camera won't stretch this far, but I'm changing. I've got them all on different stamp blocks, so I'm just moving them around. Now, obviously, this makes the forest look more like a forest, fills the picture out. Sorry, I'm going to just remove these masks because obviously we want all the trees to have branches, including the one we've masked off. So just gently remove that mask there, and gently remove the mask from the female deer. Well, I think it's female deer, I don't know. I'm quite ignorant really about stags. I need to do a bit more research, I think. I know they have a rutting season, but I think that's the males, to find out who's dominant. So anyway, please don't tell David Attenborough, will you? Right, okay, so we're going to just carry on. Now this is probably quite tedious to watch, but it is important in the obviously in the makeup of the overall picture. I'm just going to put a few more in. Oh, that one's not even grounded, look. So we'll just put one there so it looks like it is. And I think a couple more here. And there. And don't forget to don't be afraid to go off your page, because you know the eye will fill in the rest. You know, you just suggest something to the viewer, and they're what they know about what they see will just fill in the rest. So sometimes you only have to sort of suggest something for it to work. So I think that's probably enough for now. So we'll put all those back. So now there's the main sort of composition. Now what I need to do is go in and just add some more detail. So I'm going to start with toning down the main deer a little bit. So for this I'm using a pigment ink pad, Brilliance Moonlight White. And what I do is, I don't know if you can see this, I'm going to squodge a little bit down onto my craft mat. Those of you who've seen previous videos will know how I use this paintbrush technique. It's very important that you don't soak your paper with water. So we dip the brush in the water and then we dry it off on a piece of kitchen roll, and then just dip it in the ink. And then we're going to go down here where the front of the deer is. and just tone down that black a bit. Can you see what I'm doing? It's just to tone down that colour a little bit where it's a little bit harsh. And then if you do have a sort of quite a stark line that you don't want, that gets rid of that. Also, I'm going to just put a little coating of Moonlight White over at the end, which also helps this. And then on the back here, I'm going to do the same thing. So we just go down there and we're just toning him down a little bit. I'm going to leave the legs quite dark because you're not going to see some of those anyway. They're going to be covered up with the background, and I think you know, you want them to sort of show up like the antlers. I want the antlers to sort of be quite prominent. And then on the other side, you can see this deer is a little bit paler. So what I'm going to do is take some versacolor charcoal, do exactly the same thing, splodge it onto the mat, take a paintbrush, dip it in the water, dry it off a little bit, and then just pick up a little bit of that. And then we're going to go in at the back of the neck, around there. And then you see the lovely thing about not putting too much on it is that you can sort of blend it away. If you feel like if you've put too much on, now look, I'll show you what I mean. So there is a big blob there. It's a little bit too dark. So what I can do is rinse my brush, just dab it off a little bit, just use water to just blend that out, and then get at the end of the kitchen roll and just dab it, so you're taking the water off the card so it doesn't sink into the card, and you know, you'll lose the top layer of the paper because this isn't watercolour card. And then I'm just going to add a little bit up here on the antlers, because I say I want the antlers to be quite prominent. And a little bit on the nose. Now, however you shade it is really entirely up to you. You could have left the deer the way we stamped them, because, you know, I always say this when I'm doing these demonstrations, they're really just for a guide, you know, to show you different techniques and things. Your work is your work. So, and I know from some of the videos I've already done, when I see how people have interpreted them and they post them, it's so lovely to see that your own ideas have been incorporated into it. You know, sometimes things I would never have thought of. There was a lovely one the other day that had a border on it, which, you know, wasn't on my original card, and it just looked lovely. So please don't think you've got to copy every single thing the way that the demos are showing, because sometimes your interpretation is better than the original. Remember that. So now I'm just adding a little bit of white on the muzzle here. I want this to be quite prominent. And what the other thing I will tell you, I'm having to do this all in one go because obviously I'm doing a demo, but I would advise you, leave that to dry. If you're doing this, leave it to dry. You don't have to leave it too long. And then if you feel you need to add more, go over it afterwards, because what will happen is the paint will go on much better, the ink will go on much better if you've left it to dry. Okay, so I'm going to leave that for a minute because I will need to go back in and just do these white bits again. So I'm going to leave that like I'm advising you to dry. And now what I'm going to do is move on to the trees. Now here I'm doing exactly the same thing. I'm using the versacolor charcoal. I don't want all the trees to be completely white in this. I want to give them a bit of definition. So all I'm going to do is go up the side of some of them and put in, you see where Wendy's given you the markings on the trees, I'm just going to make that a little bit more prominent, especially with the front ones, because, you know, the colour is what you would see if you were standing there and they were close to you. you would see that a lot more than the ones in the background. So we're just going to add that texture in there, and then we carry on doing this. If you're a bit daunted by this, then one of the stamps, this one, is solid, so just use that stamp. If you don't want to go in and spend lots of time doing this, then if you use a solid stamp, obviously there's not so much of this to do. I mean, we don't want to cover up all the white, but we just want to cover up some of it. And then we're going to blend this out. Like this. So that our tree trunk isn't really white anymore. Do you see what I mean? In the ones that are really in the background, we don't really need to do the shading. If we just give it a little bit of a wash, you'll see that Wendy's markings still show up. So you don't need to, you know, the ones that are really in the background, you don't need to worry too much about those. And if you want to, you can leave some of them white. I'm going to actually fill in the background in a minute. So, you know, some of them will get marked like that anyway. Right, I think we've just got a couple more now to do. Now, when you're doing this at home, you can take as little or as much time as you want. When I was saying about doing this video, when I did the original, I did take quite a long time shading it. Obviously, I'm being a lot quicker today because otherwise it would be really boring to watch. But you know, again, it's your project. You spend as much or as little time as you want on it. I do think when you're doing this technique, though, the longer you spend on it, the better it will look, really. So I've sort of filled in as much as I want at the moment. And really, ideally, you would now let this dry completely. Because what I'm going to do now is go in and put some shading in the background. And you wouldn't really want to do this while your ink was wet. So fingers crossed that we don't smudge it too much, but obviously time's limited here. So what I'm going to do is take my mask again, where I've masked off here, and then I'm going to take the versacolor charcoal on the baby white technique, as always, and then I'm just going to go in upward circular movements. I'm going to take it, on this side I'm taking it right up and then just gently ease off as you get to the top. So you get a hint of the colour, but you can see it's graduating from darker to lighter. And then we continue that. Now if you want to put your mask back on the deer, or by all means do. I'm just going to wing it, because I'm going to go in and retouch him up anyway with the paint. So I'm just going to, but you know, again, it's up to you. And then we just go over there. I don't want too much behind the deer, because this is where the yellow light is going to come in. And obviously, if you put the yellow over the black, you'll get a sort of really muddy, horrible colour. So I'm going to try and leave that fairly clear. And then I'm just going to move my mask around like this to fill in this bit here. I notice there's a bit behind the deer there. Always when you're doing a more complicated, I would say this is more complicated design like this, you know, every now and again, just step back and have a look at it and think, oh no, that doesn't look right, or actually I could do with a bit more shade in there. Just take a break, you know, just go and have a cup of tea, come back. Like I say, if you're going to take my advice and let it dry properly, that's the ideal thing to do. It's an ideal thing to do on a wet afternoon. You can sit down, take your time over it, you know, take a few breaks. And I honestly think the shading is much better if you give your project time to dry in between. Some inks are quicker drying than others, obviously. The Versacolour is very good, actually. It dries very quickly. So, you know, it's quite a good ink to work with. Now, you can see here, I've got a line. Where I've put my mask like that, I've got a line across the deer. So I am going to put my little mask back in because you know, that will stand out, that little line. So I'm going to put my mask back in, and then I'm just going to shade round the deer like that. That's better. And then you can take it right into the deer, just gently, so you don't get the white line. Okay, so that's the lighter, what I call the lighter shading. I'm just going to put a little bit more up here on this side. That's what I call the lighter shading. And now I want this back bit to be quite dark. So you have to be a little bit more careful here. Now I'm using the Versacraft Real Black because Versacraft is a more opaque ink, so it will cover up what we've already done. But be careful with this. This is a very dry, quite old ink pad. So I'm quite confident it's not going to be mega black. If you've got a brand new one, then take it on your baby wipe and make sure you rub it off first, because otherwise I think it will look too black. So then, and it's always best little by little, because you can add more but you can't take it away once you've done it. So you can see what I'm doing now. I'm just putting in a very dark line, and then I'm going to take that up a little bit, and I'm going to cover up my deer again, just really to save time, because and it is easier if you're shading, it is easier to mask off. Now I've used masking paper for this, but when I did the original, I just stamped them out. I stamped the deer out on onto this masking tape, you know, in 2 bits. So if you haven't got masking paper, then don't despair. Just, you know, try things that they work, or even cut it out of copier paper. Stamp it onto copier paper, cut it out, and then with the repositionable tape, you can just tape it on like that. Okay, so we're just going to go back with this darker black. Darker black? Is there such a thing as darker black? You know what I mean. Sometimes doing these videos, you sort of ramble on. And when I watch them back, I think, oh, goodness sake. I noticed in the last video, I just kept saying but trust me, you don't know you're doing that when you're making the videos. So I apologise to anyone who's irritated by that. So again, I'm just going up. Now this does take a bit of time, and like I said, one of the reasons I wasn't sure about making this video is because I understand when you're watching these, you know, it can get a bit boring watching the same process over and over again. And then I thought, well, if you feel like that, you can just fast forward. You know, if you're an experienced crafter and you get what I'm saying, just fast forward, you know, fast forward through this bit. Okay, so I think we're nearly done now. Now we want to try and keep that, although we're doing this dark colour at the back, we do want to try and keep that horizon line, because that's what keeps the deer sort of grounded. I have gone over a little bit there, but I'm not really worried about that, because I'm going to take this, try and, if that happens, look, so I've gone over that horizon. If that happens, just put the mask back, make that a little bit darker there, like that, and then blend that out into the forward picture, like that. Which I'm going to go back now to the charcoal, and I'm just going to bring that down with very gently, because I want to keep that line, so I'm just very gently bringing that down like that. That's it. Now, while we've got the deer masked up, I'm now going to put the front in. And on the original, you'll see the front is quite dark. So we're going to go back with the Versacraft Real Black. And we don't want it too much, but we want it to sort of go up like that and then along the front. Just be careful when you're going over the mask, because if you push up, it will flick the mask up. And obviously we're using quite a dark colour now, so we don't, like that, like I just did there, we don't really want to darken, I mean, it doesn't really matter so much down the bottom here, because in a minute I'm going to take the mask off and cover that up anyway. But if you push up and then it ends up higher up, it might spoil the look of the deer that you've done. And then we take that up. I want that sort of a little bit higher up at each side. The reason I like doing this is because it sort of frames the picture. It's a way of taking the viewer's eye into your picture. It's as if you're looking over, you're standing on the other side of whatever this is, like be it a bush or a hedge, or so you're sort of looking over it into the foreground. Right. Now you can see where the tree comes down here, you can still see the trunk of the tree, and I don't want that, so I'm now going to go in with a permanent ink. So I'm using my Versafine black. Now this is really black, obviously, so again, just be very careful, blend a bit off and then go. So you can see that will cover up, because we want really the base of those trees to disappear into our foreground like that. And then I'm going to go back and do that one. And then just take that along the very bottom to that one. And then up there. And then when we take this masking tape off, it will give us a lovely line. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the mask off the big deer, the standing deer, and I'm going to do the same with his feet, because I don't want his feet to be that prominent. So I'm just going to cover those over. Like that. Okay, now at the moment it looks very stark black, but when I've finished, I'm going to put a coating of the moonlight white over, which will tone it down quite a lot. So now I'm going to stamp in my tree, well, branch, it's the branch, it's from the Peaceful Panorama, and I'm going to do this in versafine black as well. But I'm going to start off secondary stamping it. So what I'm doing is putting the ink on it, and then I'm going to stamp it off onto my paper like that, and then put it on here like that. Do you see? So it's a little bit more subtle. And then I'm going to do the same all the way along. I don't want this too high. I just want the suggestion that there's foliage that the viewer is looking over. Put that one there. Put a little bit there. And there. And we're just going to go a little bit up the side. I don't want this too high. I'm just going to put a tiny bit there to frame that deer. And then look at it. If you can see any gaps, there's probably a little bit of a gap there. And I want one there to sort of cover up there. And then I'm going to take one of the little branches, this one, and do exactly the same. So it's just continues, gives a bit of continuity from the top. And I'm stamping this straight onto the card because I'm only going to do a few of these. But I just want a little bit of continuity with the branches on the trees. So I think one more and that will do. Okay, so that's the bottom of our card done. And now, because I've been using a permanent ink, I'm going to wipe my hands. I use a microfiber cloth which I wet, and then obviously I'm not doing it today for time, but when I've used my stamps I wipe them with this, and I find that's really all the cleaning they need. If you do it as you go along, they shouldn't need a lot of cleaning, but I do know there is a stamp cleaner you can buy if yours do get particularly clogged up. Okay, so we're going to take this mask off this deer, and then we're going to add in a little bit of the yellow. Now I'm using a colour called marigold. It doesn't really matter what yellow you use for this. The reason I'm using marigold is because it's got a slight orangey tint to it, and this is supposed to be sunlight coming through the forest. So I thought this was suitable for this, but really if you haven't got this colour in your craft stash, any yellow will do. So we get a clean bit of the baby wipe, we put some on there, and now this is quite a strong yellow, so we're going to rub a little bit off as we usually do, and then we're going to work down from the top and then put the yellow in the places where you can see where it still looks quite white. And then I'm going stronger at the top because I want it to look stronger up here, and then just bring it down very gently to the rest of it. Now obviously you would ideally let everything dry because, I say, you have to be a bit careful with yellow. If you do this over wet ink, it will just go a horrible sort of smudgy colour. But I'll show you if I mix that in there. Oh, lucky that's quite dry. But you know, you want this to look yellow. And then we just take it over into the corners where the light would sort of be hitting other parts of the tree there. If you can see, I'm rubbing it off onto my masking tape first before I come down, and a little bit there. So I think that's probably enough. And the reason I've done that first, because I'm now going to go back in and look at my picture and see if there's any little things that need touching up. I think some of the trees I want to make a little bit darker. So I'm going to use my charcoal, versacolor charcoal for this, and I'm going to go do exactly what I did before. This one I want to just bend the bottom out a little bit. Like that. And same here, just give that a bit of width at the bottom. This one I'm going to shade in a bit more because I want it to look a bit more prominent as well. And I'm going to use a little bit of the Versacraft Real Black for this one, very gently. Now, if obviously after I finish this video I'll probably continue to do this for a while. I'm not going to do this because I think you now get the idea, and if you refer back to the original picture, which is on the Cardio Facebook page, you'll see that you know, the sort of colouring and the shading that I've done on those. But again, like I say, just have fun with it. You know, you're doing it. Have fun with it. What do you think a forest would look like? Do you want more trees? Do you want less trees? Do you want your trees all to be white? You know, so that's what I'm saying. This is really just to give you an idea of how I make these cards, so you can then interpret them in your own way. And it's very flattering for me to see some of those posted. It's lovely, and thank you all very much for all your lovely, kind comments on my posts. Okay, so I think that's the main composition done. I'm now going to go back in and I'm going to touch up. So if you look now, you can see where the tree doesn't, you know, there's a little white line here I don't want. There's a little white line there that I don't want. So I'm going to go back in with the Versacolor charcoal, and I'm going to use a slightly thinner paintbrush for this. Now, if you don't have any paintbrushes in your stash, you can use cotton buds, or you can just use a baby wipe. You don't, you know, if you mask off the tree, you can just use a baby wipe and go over it, like, you know, the technique we've been using. I'm just going to move that over so we blur out that line, and I'm going to blur out these lines because and then I'm just going to dab that with a piece of kitchen roll. I'm just going to water that down because I don't want to lose that background line, you see. And then there's a little bit behind his tail. And then we go back over to this stair and we'll just and then just under here. Now sometimes you need that little bit of white shading to make the, you know, make the deer stand out. I've noticed this is a little bit overdone, so I'm just adding water and then just going to take it off with that. And then I'm just going to go back in and make this tree more prominent here. I'm going to use a little bit of the versacraft black. Right. And then now I've nearly finished. So what I'm going to do now is splodge a bit of the brilliance back on. You know, I said to you it's best if you let this dry before you add the white, because otherwise it doesn't really take. So I'm going to just dab the areas where I'm going to put it, and then I'm going to go back in. There, you see it takes much better when the and then this side. Like that. Right. Like I said to you before, this area here is very dark in contrast to the rest of it. So what I'm going to do is now this has to be obviously a clean part of your baby white. I'm actually going to use a new one for this because I don't want to risk the white getting contaminated. And then you take your Brilliance Moonlight White, you take a little bit on your baby white and then just gently run it right the way down the picture. I'll do this side first and then you'll be able to see the difference. Just very gently like this. And then just over the bottom bit again. Now, you can see the two sides. you can see the harsh black and the gentle black. Now the lovely thing about this technique, it doesn't actually stop that being quite prominent at the front. It just tones it all down and gives it a much softer look. So we're just going to do the same on this side. I don't really want to go up from the top too much on that side because I don't want to pale the yellow very much. So we're just going to put that on that side, and then I'm just going to go gently over the trees like that. And then look at your project. Is there anything that you could do that will make it look better? And I think that as you've watched my previous videos, I'd just like to go in with a fine liner on the areas that I just want to highlight, which is this tree particularly, because I want it to be obviously obvious it's in front of the stag, so I want it to stand out. And I'm going to do the same here, but I'm going to start a little bit off the deer because I don't want it to look like the deer is part of the, I don't want to join it up to the deer's nose or anything. I'm going to do the same there. And with this one, because this one's also in the front of the picture. And this one here. And also you can just add a few of the lines with this if you want to. This isn't really necessary, but it just, instead of just being a straight line then on the tree, it just gives a bit of detail like that. Okay. So the thing I did in this picture, you might not be able to tell. I've just noticed there's a real white bit there. This is what I mean. When you step back from your picture, sometimes you see. So I'm just going to add a little bit of the charcoal just to blend that in because it stands out quite a lot. And I've also noticed this deer here is, I'm just going to run a little line up there. And then what I'm going to do is take my paintbrush, run it down there to blend that a little bit, and then blot it out. That's it. And then we'll go back in with the charcoal there, just to tone that down. So you've now got a definition line between that deer and the forest like that. And then also, if you don't want, if you have any sort of harsh lines that you don't want, you do exactly the same that with the Brilliance Moonlight White technique. You just take a little bit onto your baby white and then just run it along the back, and that will tone down any harsh lines that you might have. I mean, you do have to have a bit of definition because otherwise they'll just fade into the background there. The other thing I like to do, I like to put a little black dot in for the eyes, and I like to add a nose. Don't ask me why. So I'm going to give that deer a little eye. I don't know, it just brings them to life, I think. I don't know what you think, and then I'm just going to add a little bit of charcoal grey onto the body there, just so that white is toned down a little bit. Now this is what I tend to do. So I go on for ages and ages, backwards and forwards with these pictures, which is why they are so, they look so detailed. And I know some people said, oh, that's not a quick make, that would take ages. Well, that is true. I'm not going to lie to you. Some of my posts have taken quite a long time, but there are easier and simple ways of doing them, and I hope I've given you a basis anyway for what I do. Again, these are pictures to make your own. They're just ideas. So my last thing for this picture, and I'm just going to clear up a bit now because this is the fun part. So we're going to splodge some Moonlight White on my mat, and this pad is running out a little bit, so you do need quite a little bit for this. And then you need a paintbrush for this. Now, I've got to be honest, a fan brush is best, but if you haven't got a fan brush, then use a toothbrush. If you're using a toothbrush, do it, run your fingers along the toothbrush, do it like that, or any brush, to be honest. But I think a fan brush, because it's a fan, it obviously gives more coverage. Then dip it in the water. You need quite a lot of water. This needs to be quite wet, so this is a bit scary, right? And you're only really going to do this once, which is why you've sort of got to get it right the first time. I don't think I've got enough white there, so I'm just going to splodge a little bit more into that. That's it, and then we're just going to dip that brush in again. And then I'm using a knife, but you know, use whatever you want, and then just very gently tap it all over. Now you're only going to do this once, so don't be tempted to go over and over and over it, because what happens is you end up with really big splodges that don't look like snow. Now I hope that comes out on the video. You can see. Now some of it will dry in, but the lovely thing about this Moonlight White, it's got a lovely sort of sheen to it, so you will see it when it dries. If you want to, you can go in with a glue pen, or you know, some sort of glitter afterwards. That's entirely up to you. But really, that's I say that's a matter of personal choice. And the last thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to add a little bit of charcoal to the back of my deer hair, because it's a little bit, I want a little bit of contrast in the colour. As I say, I would spend quite a long time now shading those deer in so they looked, you know, till I was happy with them. But I think you get the idea now, and the video would be far too long if I actually did that. So, one more thing I have noticed is just there. I just want to get rid of that. Okay, so now I'm going to remove the masking tape. And there's our card. This was the original picture, and this is one I've just made. So I hope that that's been helpful to you, and I look forward to you joining me the next time. Thank you very much.